All right, we are recording. All right, this is Morgan and Erin. We are coming to you from different sides of the country. We're covering the country. Maybe we need like another person to cover the globe.
Yeah, right? West Coast.
It's what?
I said West Coast. We need some West Coast.
Yeah, we have some West Coast people, you know, we kind of need you. So I am Morgan Field. I am a life coach and intuitive. I am the founder of Epic Sexy You, which is a global empowerment brand and movement that is crossing the globe. We're in 18 countries and counting. I am the author of the Amazon bestseller, Epic Sexy You. You'll see a pattern of language. And it's an award-winning book. It's amazing. It's about self-love. It's inspirational. It's motivational. It's self-empowerment. Really helps you create a life you love living, a you love being, and what Erin and I are going to be talking a lot about in this series is, you know, a body you love being in, and just knowing like all of the different pieces that are going to help you create all of the, like, create a lot of sparkle and magic in your life. I am genuinely on a mission to awaken and expand as many souls as humanly possible, and to just reawaken people, because I feel like it's like awesomeness amnesia, reawaken people to their divine majesty. And I am a recovering hot mess. You know, I've gone from hot mess to greatness. I'm a recovering, you know, people ask me, because I've been sober for 5 years, people ask like, you know, are you an alcoholic? And it's like, if we want to call me a recovering alcoholic, sure, I cannot stop after one drink. So maybe a recovering addict, because I really, really notice, and I'm very conscious of the addiction energy that is very prominent in my energy profile, which is actually also really common in a lot of light workers, that consuming compulsive energy. So I play a lot with that in the tribe of like, what do you actually do with that? So yeah, I have a background in holistic nutrition. All sorts of stuff. And I've healed my body from like every autoimmune disease under the sun. So Erin and I get together and have these amazing conversations about life and how to create our best selves. And I thought it would be really selfish to keep Erin all to myself. So we decided to just start doing the series. And Erin, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm Morgan's bestie. We've known each other a little bit before 2004, but really started to get to know each other after we both graduated college. I have been a nurse for over 13 years. I am a full-time working mom and wife. I am a recovering perfectionist and an aspiring good enoughist. I also have suffered some autoimmune disorders. I have celiac disease, so I don't eat any sort of gluten products. I'm a vegetarian for the past, 23 years. That was the last time I ate meat. So that's not my bag. Not saying, and Morgan and I are both, I'm not a vegan, I eat eggs, but we're both at least animal meat free. Except for the eggs, both dairy free, but we don't push that on people. It's like to each their own. Whatever's going to work for your body, you're going to kind of see that when we talk about things. Like, we're here to find what works for you. So I am helping Morgan with her revolution to empower women. Join the revolution with us, ladies or gents. And we're here to, try to make people's lives better through health, fitness, just taking their own power back and control in their life and not giving it away, and, you know, hopefully making it better for themselves and for generations after them.
Yes, we are trying to help you figure out what works for Epic Sexy You. So I love that. Yeah, it's a movement. It's just, you know, I'm so excited to be doing this, and it's even more fun to share the journey with you, which I tell you all the time. And we're getting a lot of feedback. I get a lot of people writing in, telling me about how amazing Erin is, and I agree. So yes. So on our last episode, we mentioned, let us know what it is that you'd actually like us to cover in terms of topics, and if you haven't seen the prior episodes that we've done, Go check those out. They're awesome. And this one, today we're going to be talking about boundaries. So one of our soul sisters from the UK, who's actually originally from Pakistan, she wrote in and said she would like to talk about boundaries. And I love boundaries. But when I first found out about them, I did not love them at all. In fact, I actually found out that I didn't know what they were. I actually remember being about 6 years ago, I was in my therapist's office, and she said to me, you know, I really think that you need some boundaries in your life. And I was like, boundaries? Could you tell me what, you know, like I had no idea what that actually meant, what that meant, and I remember her giving me this book by Dr. Henry Cloud called Boundaries. Such a good
I love him.
Yeah, such a good book, like, you know. So it's a really good beginner's guide to boundaries. What I have found in studying boundaries now for 6 years and going deeper and deeper in the past 6 months to a year is that there's like there's so many layers of what boundaries are, what they mean, and what they can do in your life. So before we even hit recording, all of these yummy goodies and downloads were already coming through, just that we get to share with you today. So I'm like so excited. And I just wanted to share with you what our soul sister from the UK said, because it was funny. She said, I would love if you did something on setting boundaries in a healthy way, i.e. by not being passive aggressive, and then like a fun little emoji. Because a lot of times what happens when we look at boundaries is the way that they're done is they're done in a way to like protect you from like it's very like it can be rigid and it can be very protective. And one of the things is that there are ways that you're also able with boundaries, and like I shared this with Erin, is I'm actually when this topic was asked to be brought up, I was excited because we'll use this as a teaser I'm doing an entire series this year on boundaries because of how I believe that like there's a really high vibration way to use them, where it's not only to like keep bad stuff out, which is what I had to learn. Step one was learning like, how do you keep toxic things out? Toxic people, toxic things, toxic activities, toxic, everything was so toxic when I first started. And then it was like, okay, now how do you let in magic? Like how do you invite people to your magic sparkle party? And that's the level and layer that I'm starting to play in, is helping, is playing with, I'm always my own guinea pig first, right? So like I've been playing with, how do I invite people to my sparkle party? And so I love this question of how do you set boundaries in a healthy way and do it not in a passive aggressive way. And so Erin and I are also going to talk about, just in general, like why boundaries or how boundaries show up in life and why you could use them. And we're just going to, kind of free flow and play. But so Erin, before we were recording, we were kind of talking about that initial piece as far as like, the one giving the boundary and the one receiving the boundary. Do you want to? We'll just jump in.
Sure. So I like what you're saying about, how you can set boundaries. Like they're not like some people set boundaries and they're super duper rigid, but that they don't have to be. And it's funny because I remember when you started, there were two things even before getting into that you, I remember you looking at me one day, we were talking about something or we were out and I think we were probably drinking. But I was talking about something with my husband and how I was just kind of like, yeah, no, that's not going to fly. And you were like, you're really good with boundaries. And I remember being like, thanks. But at the same time of you saying that, like while I had some healthy boundaries in my relationship, I had barely any professional boundaries whatsoever. So like that was an arena, which is hilarious. And I, even unbeknownst to myself. So it was super, super sneaky. And I think a lot of times with boundaries or lack of boundaries, people are unaware that they don't have any in place. So I remember that point, and like you would have this like look on your face where you were like I was some wise sage, and you know, really I was a total dick at work, like dehydrating myself, not eating, maybe not peeing for 13 hours and wearing it as a badge of honor, you know? So it's funny how you can be good in it in one arena and maybe still need practice in it in another, you know, c'est la vie. But on that same subject, when we were talking about boundaries, you're saying like being really rigid with it, and being able to like let things in. I remember when you were super rigid, when you were trying to like learn how to filter out everything. And like you and I had a relationship where we never really said no to each other, but we also really didn't we didn't violate each other's boundaries or anything. You know what I mean? It was a pretty open relationship. But I remember the first time you said no to me, like I was like, oh, let's do this, or hey, do you want to go here? And you were like, no. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, and I went through a phase where I was like, why did Morgan, like I was hurt by it. You know, it was funny and interesting because I was like, why did Morgan, like, why is she being selfish? I never did that to her. You know, so why is she doing it to me, in the sense of like, I didn't think I violated her boundaries. So it was an interesting place to be without obviously knowing all the pieces to your puzzle at the time. You know, now it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But like at the time, I remember being like very hurt by it. Like, what did I do wrong? But it's been awesome to see your progression of like where you were and to where you are, which is amazing. And then also working on my own boundaries. But then by having these boundaries and being able to filter things through, it's like having boundaries, which in a sense is actually, it's a limit, right? Like that's the actual definition of it. It's a boundary is a limit. It actually gives you a whole shit ton of freedom.
Yes.
If you think about it, like by creating these boundaries, you may end up with a lot more freedom in your personal life, in your professional life, in your relationships, you know, a lot more artistic license. So that's like an amazing thing that people don't realize too, because they just think of boundary and think of it in a negative connotation. So I think when you're starting off with boundaries, like you were talking about, and we were talking about before we hit record, is the whole, you know, it's, I think again, with the negative connotation, the boundary maker or the boundary setter, often after they make it or before they make it, starts to feel guilty and bad that they're setting the boundary. So that must have actually been really hard for you. In fact, I know how hard that was for you when you started saying no to people. Like, that's so fucking uncomfortable. Yeah. And like, people don't think about that. But then as the boundary receiver, it's like, it can totally trigger you and cause a total shame spiral, even though again, it's not actually personal. It has maybe not that much to do with you, and maybe it does, but more to do with the person who's setting the boundary and like whatever they need in their life in order to flourish and thrive.
Yes. Okay. So here's what's so cool about this piece. It's understanding that the whole idea of boundary is knowing where I start and where you stop. Mm-hmm. I mean, where you start, or I stop and you start, right?
Right.
It's knowing what's my responsibility and what's your responsibility. And when we stop being so fucking responsible for other people's feelings and emotions and responses and reactions, and we say, what am I responsible for? Well, here's the thing. What I feel personally responsible for is to offer you a friendship. Mm-hmm. In whatever way I define that friendship. And as I have expanded, my definition of friendship has changed. So at one point, right, our friendship was, our rules of engagement in the friendship, mm-hmm. consciously or subconsciously, was like, no rules, you know, like mm-hmm. no boundaries.
Right.
And the tagline of the book is no rules, no limits. And the idea isn't that you have no boundaries. It's that you create your own rules in your life. Like, why would you let someone else dictate? So when we say, okay, you know, the rules of engagement for myself, I'm going to be able to create and or co-create with someone, then I become responsible for inviting you to my sparkle factory.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything that you're doing that I feel like the next time you come knock on my door, I may not want you to come into my sparkle factory, it is my responsibility to tell you in the moment. Mm-hmm. Now, let me tell you how I used to do this. Well, usually I would get drunk. I would get drunk and then I would like Victima bomb someone. Usually someone I was dating who I shouldn't have been dating anyways. So, you know, but like.
And I was like, she's good. I'll take her home. It's just, we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Which I shouldn't have been dating half the people I dated anyways. But again, I was making all of my choices while I was drunk. So I was like drunk and choosing boyfriends. So again, sobriety is my jam. Okay. So what ended up happening too is like I would get drunk and then I would Victima bomb or like spicy McChicken bomb. So I'd either get angry or like play the victim role. Like, you're doing this to me, blah, blah, blah. I had boundaries that were being violated. Someone was taking sparkle from my factory. Mm-hmm. And I wanted it to be their fault. Mm-hmm. But they can't take something unless I let them. Mm. So what ended up happening is, also another way that I used to do it is I used to think it was courageous. This is where sometimes our ninja mind likes to come in and do I used to think it was courageous to tell someone how they violated my boundary after there was no possibility of friendship or relationship.
Yeah.
So like at the conclusion, I was already done.
Right.
I'm already done.
But let me tell you,
all
the things that could have been helpful before.
I call them you're time machining me.
Right.
You're giving me information. You're communicating with me in a way where you're telling me what I could have done in the past to make this situation better. Mm-hmm. But like I can't change it. Yeah.
Right.
So, and also another passive aggressive way of boundaries, or that we think we're we're creating boundaries, or that we're creating an opportunity for people to have real friendships. Another way that happens is like, we will avoid something, or we feel like we're, you and I talked about this a lot, but like ghosting, sometimes we think, and I see this a lot in clients with dating, where it's like, like people get ghosted a lot, instead of just me. And again, it depends, right? Obviously, but I even see it where it's like, in relationships where it's, and or in friendships where when something is uncomfortable, it's ghosting happens, avoiding, ghosting, falling off, dropping off, avoiding actually addressing whatever it is. And so I always look at it as a spectrum when we look at boundaries. Like, on one side of the spectrum is one vibration, and on the other side is a high, so it's like maybe like this, right? So it's like, you have a vibration here of boundaries and a vibration up here of boundaries. And here's the thing is that when you start, you're going to start down here, and that's okay. Yeah. And you're going to bounce up. And so it's like, you get to learn as you go. And so I love that question, because she was saying other than being passive aggressive about it. Passive aggressive just means that your actions and your words and your desires are not aligned. So as you align yourself, when you're up here at this vibration, one of the ways that you can do boundaries is like asking yourself, what do I want and need? And then in the moment, expressing what you want and need. And often you can bring boundaries by bringing like solution, right? Right. Like, here's how in the future, like, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't know. You can't read my mind. Right. In the future though, if we could do this, this, and this, that would be great. And what do you need from me in return? Right. Because it's not fair to, like your analogy of the sparkle party. It's not fair to let someone into the sparkle party and let them do whatever they want
and you've got certain rules and expectations about how those things should go, but no one else at the party knows the rules and expectations and knows how to play. And then you're like, they're the worst, right? So like bringing the solution is super helpful, 100% too, because exactly, then you're not just like, here's a problem. You're like, hey, this is an issue, and I've got some solutions on how to make it better for both of us. Because usually boundaries are healthy boundaries, in my opinion. You tell me what you think, but they're not hurtful or like infringing on someone else's freedoms or rights or whatever. Like, you know, like they're not malicious. They're just, it's really, they're win-wins essentially. Now the other person receiving the boundary may not feel that way, depending on what avatar they're playing with, or what thoughts and reactions and glasses they've got on. So like you were talking about, like sometimes those lower vibe avatars, if you are dealing with a lot of perfectionista energy and a lot of people pleasing and approval whoring, he or she is not going to want to set boundaries, and they're going to shame spiral hard if someone else sets boundaries, because that goes against people pleasing. By setting boundaries, someone might be mad at you in your head. Those are the thoughts you're going to tell yourself. And I totally have been in that pattern before. You know, and by someone setting boundaries, the message you're going to give yourself off the bat is, I did something wrong that made them unhappy, and now they're not happy with me, and now I'm not good, and blah, and it goes from there. Victima loves having no boundaries, in my opinion, and what I've seen from, you know, maybe my own Victima or other people's. It's like, yes, no boundaries. Like, just sit here and fester and get mad while you martyr yourself about how everyone is taking advantage of you. And then you know, with some people it's cyclical, where all of a sudden, like, she gets the spotlight and she is like, hey, I'm being taken advantage of by everybody and you're all fucking dicks. And that is her time to shine, you know? So it's like, and then everyone's like, what happened? Like, you've just been acting like you've been going, this is cool. No problem. Because I was a no problem person. And then they freak out and they blow up at everybody. And everyone's like, what happened? And it is totally cyclical. Sometimes you can like nail someone down like to, every 3 to 4 months they blow up, or every holiday, or every whatever. So like, if you were functioning with those avatars at the forefront, like, boundaries is going to be difficult.
Yeah, boundaries takes courage.
Yeah.
And when I talk about courage, I mean courage in the moment. Now, granted, you can always go back and draw it's like, it's never too late to draw a boundary. It's just, you know, not take it from me and my past, right, that I've learned. It's not super effective to draw a boundary once it's too late for the person to do anything.
Right.
You know, and then be like, I'm drawing boundaries, I'm speaking up for myself. It's like, not really. You're kind of, right, you're just sharing everything the person did wrong, and there's no opportunity to co-create resolution and solution. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so the other thing too I've learned with boundaries is, and still learning, is how people respond isn't personal. Like,
yeah, that kind of goes back to that whole lesson you've talked about with the lamp, or or we've talked about, where it's just like, it's actually more a reflection of what's going on with them at the time than it is you. And remembering that too.
Yeah, it's also, what I have found is that when I first draw a boundary, I get someone's reaction, not their response.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
And I always dig deep for some compassion. especially putting myself in empathy, in a healthy space of empathy, because I actually think empathy can be dangerous to the point where you're like, oh, I understand why that's happening, so I'll allow it. It's like, no, like having empathy to understand why someone might be reacting that way. Reacting. But healthy empathy is not attaching yourself to being the ownership of that energy. You can from afar understand what they're experiencing, but really letting them own that. Cause that's their, we talk about bags of shit on the last episode, like letting them own their own bags of shit.
Yeah.
Because it's really, that's another beautiful thing about boundaries is, when someone tries to hand me their bag of shit, like something that's their responsibility. Like I am almost too good at taking responsibility for things. Like,
oh yeah,
my do-it-all girl avatar will convince me that, everything is my responsibility, including your feelings.
I've got one of those too. Yeah.
Right. And so she will actually look back on situations that didn't go didn't have the outcomes I would have desired. Oftentimes it's like with relationships, whether it's friendships or business partnerships or romantic relationships. And she, if it was her way, she would own all of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I have
learned.
One of those too. Yeah. You what?
I got one of those too.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do. That's what I love about what we're talking about. And a lot of people who've been writing in have been saying, like, what they love about this series is that we're just showing you that you're normal. Like we're
all going through it.
Yes. And that, we're talking about it, taking that same flashlight and putting it on shame and actually talking about it takes power away from shame, and secrecy breeds shame. So when we don't talk about things like sex in our culture, we don't really talk about, it's like such a taboo thing in America, and in some of the other different countries, right? So there's like shame around it, or just the topics where we don't talk about things. It just breeds shame. Secrecy breeds shame. So, when it comes to boundaries, right? Like it's also just a piece of knowing that, also that's the same thing too, like if we're not talking about these violations, the secrecy, it starts breeding shame in ourselves, even if it's like the subconscious shame. So it's interesting. Cause like, even as it's talking about it, it's like people listening, like we're all going through it. We're all figuring it out together. That's my, mission, is to just keep going and going and going and going, to give you a path that you can potentially see and normalize things and know what's coming. And boundaries are so damn magical and yummy when you give yourself permission to know what's yours and hand back what's not yours. So the do-it-all girl, to go back, I digress. What I have learned is to tell myself, one of my mantras for her is like, I will own my part, I will not own yours. I will own my part, I will not own yours. And so that's also where we can start looking at like, well, what is mine?
Right. And I that's funny that in the beginning you mentioned Dr. Henry Cloud's book, because he's one of the Instagram accounts I follow, and I love him and all his work on boundaries. And that's why I was like, I'm so excited, because that, like, oh my God, that resonated, and it was like woke something up in me when I read, like, he's doing the whole thing, I think, about like myths on boundaries. And one of them is, I am responsible for everyone. Not responsible to, but responsible for. And man, especially as women and as matriarchs and maternal instincts and all of that stuff, whether you have children or not, it's like, oh, you will just keep taking. You will keep taking. And like, oh, that's your bag of shit. No, I got that. Yeah, no, I'll take that one too. Okay, cool. So like, that's awesome that you're creating this program, just because of the fact that like you get to help people, and especially women, like figure out, what am I responsible for? What am I responsible to? And the difference, because man, that's another, it's like totally freeing. So freeing.
Yes. Okay. So there's another piece that's coming through here too, which is around. Okay. this is where the passive aggressive thing comes in. It's like when you're responsible for your own stuff, all your own sparkle, right? What happens is you're not just responsible to tell someone. This is another thing that took me a long time in my boundaries. I used to tell boundaries left and right. Like, no, 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 right? But then my actions would say yes.
Right.
But then I was like, well, I told that person, you know, I'm trying to think of an example. It's like when you tell someone, you know, you need to be responsible for yourself. Like you tell someone, you need to be responsible for your own stuff, right? And they're like, no problem. And then they dump their stuff on your plate and you're doing it.
If you are looking for someone, if you want to like do an assessment on people and see if they've got the passive aggressive boundary, I'm willing to lend out my 2-year-old toddler son, because he will very quickly weed out who is victim to that, or who participates in that, because he is, you know, that's a very easy way. Like, you know, when I see this with people, and I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Like, you know, he wants to eat food off my plate, let's say. We could have the same exact thing on my plate. And he's going, oh, and here he comes. Oh, there's a cat butt coming. Okay, there it is. So, you know, hey, no, Luke, this is my food. Okay, like, this is mom's food. You've got your own. And I'm telling him no. So I'm setting the boundary and the limit, right? Like, go back to your own plate, kid. Like, we're eating our own thing. And then he comes over and he sits on my lap and he's being all cute and adorable. And I let him eat off my plate. And then I'm like, oh, well, you know, it was just cute and it's just one time. I violated my own boundary. I can't be mad at the kid for doing it because I allowed him to do it. That's my fault.
That happens in relationships all the damn time.
It's not just for toddlers, people.
Exactly. Well, right? It comes down to having courage to offer yourself and someone else a relationship based on authenticity, whether it is in your workplace, whether it is in your friendships, whether it is in a romantic relationship, whether, you know, it's like, it's knowing that, it's also, so because, you know, the thing is like, if someone is doing something over and over and over and over again, to your point, you said it earlier, the unwritten rules, you've got these rules and expectations of what this person should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And they're not abiding by your conversation you're having in your head, which I used to do. Yeah. Relationships. Yeah. Right? Like we have this idea of how this person should be or shouldn't be. And like we have all these conversations in our head about what should be happening. But we don't share it with the person.
You know, and I think you raise a good point in that your example of like that happens so frequently in relationships, and you're totally right. I think it also happens in other areas, not even just romantic relationships. Like we talk about health and fitness. Like people are sitting around getting resentful of their jobs or, you know, how busy they are with their kids or whatever their spouse is doing, because they're like, I'm doing all this stuff and, you know, I just never have any time for me and no one ever, you know, appreciates what I do. And like, this is a funny example, but I remember my mom when I was in high school, like I had a job, I would caddy and I worked at Jewel and I like wanted to be cool and go to Victoria's Secret and buy their underwear. You know, they're like bikini underwear, like just the like plain old bikini bottoms that they had. And I remember coming back from the store or saying I went there, or like maybe my mom saw my bag. And I can remember, it's so funny. Like I had a pair of purple leopard print, like it was like a lavender color. I thought they were like the coolest thing ever. And I remember her seeing them and looking at me being like, must be nice to have underwear from Victoria's Secret. Like all I have is underwear from Kohl's. I ain't buying your underwear, lady. You're in charge of your own underwear. So like, there are so many areas like health and fitness, like you're in charge of working out yourself. It's not your husband or your kid or your job's responsibility to drop you off at the gym and put you on a treadmill or to take, you know, the food choices you're making and change them for you. it's on you. And the beautiful thing about that is, you know, if you're responsible for it, you've got the power to change it.
Yes. I mean, it's the same thing too. Like, this is where, and again, so like, if you have no boundaries, starting with the word no is a good boundary. It's the only,
Yeah.
that's the first chapter in my book talks about that, because that's where my whole journey started.
Yeah.
Right. It was like,
yeah.
I was 35 pounds overweight. I had like 4 or 5 autoimmune diseases. I didn't know until I got to experience what it felt like to be like, to not have indigestion, to not be inflamed, I didn't even know that it was possible. Like, I just thought how I felt was normal. And I gave 18 plus hours a day to my office. I never said no to my team. I never said no to a boss. You know what I mean? Like, I always had shit. Like, you bring up a good point in the workplace. Like, 2 things. One is that, you know, we're afraid to say no, which is interesting, because when I started saying no in the workplace, it did change the way people looked at me. It did. At the same time, it empowered the way I felt about myself. So sometimes the thing we're the most afraid of to do is the very thing that actually creates the confidence for us to be unapologetically ourselves.
Well, and sometimes by saying no at your job or in other areas of your life, instead of just like, I think we think that if we don't say no, like, I don't think we understand that by never saying no, or we don't correlate by never saying no, that like, it's like if the amount of saying no or boundaries you have correlates with the amount of resentment you have. So the less you say no, the more resentment you have to whatever arena of life, you know, you're dealing with and have no boundaries. And so, you know, when you say no, like you're saying, it empowers you and everything. And actually you find yourself resenting your job less, enjoying it more, because it's not sucking so much out of you, or your relationships, you know, or your children. Like, God love them. I love my son. But if I said yes to every single thing he wanted and, you know, never set any boundaries to, you know, do any like self-care for myself, like that makes me a better mom.
Yeah.
And I think that that's drastically underutilized, or like the power of no, because it's got such a negative connotation and everyone is so afraid to do it. But like, really and truthfully, especially with your book, like you talked about self-love and like self-care, and like there's a lot of resources and now it's like emerging. I feel like, you know, the self-care stuff, now that I'm thinking about it, was like really to try to do that without setting healthier boundaries for myself, and practicing those was like putting the cart before the horse. Because when I could say like, hey, no, I'm not going to go to that party because I want to go to bed early. Or no, I'm going to make myself unavailable for this block of time at work because there are 1,440 minutes in the day and I deserve 30 of them to move my body and work out. And stuff like that. Like, it actually created more joy in my life.
Yeah, you're the master creator. We talk about this the whole time in the series. That's what this is about. It's not about a one-size-fits-all solution, because there isn't, which we're always looking for. It's about going internal and feeling your way through, what do I want to create? I'll be like a broken record in all of these series. What do I want? What do I want? What do I want? You have to know what you want to create, which means I can't have someone outside of me tell me what I want. That's not how this works. You got to go internal. There's no test. There's no memorizing. There's no no, it's internal. You have to know what you want. And then you have to be true to yourself in what comes out of your mouth, and also in how you actually show your boundary, right? Like, you have to align all of it. And a lot of happiness, you know, I do a lot of research around dream chasing, happiness, creating your heaven on earth, self-love, confidence. A lot of it is, for me, what I have embraced as my own definition of success is the amount of time I get to spend loving being me. So I constantly, when I'm playing the boundary game, I'm asking myself, what would make me most proud of being me in this moment? And sometimes that's also giving yourself permission to say yes to things it's not always about no, but like giving yourself permission. Again, this is where like, so this keeps out stuff, but this is like letting in, like, yes, I'm going to create this boundary of space to let in some sparkle and magic and allow someone to come into my sparkle factory. And so a piece of that is saying, so like working out, saying yes to working out because you want to and you make that time, like you said.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
And knowing what you're actually creating. So to address the question too that the woman wrote in about, because I can hear this piece floating around, well, how do you do it, right? Like, how do you, like tangible examples, like how do you draw a boundary? And a piece of it is just knowing, again, that you're going to draw, like, again, I've been playing with this for 6 years, and then even more so recently playing on a whole new level and layer, is a couple things. One is knowing whatever it is that you actually want, and two, just fucking get it out of your mouth. Right?
Yeah.
That's like step one. Like whatever it is, you know, whether it's a no or whether I can't do that, or whether it's like, hey, you know what, I actually need more time, or what, right? Like a lot of times I think what happens is when someone else asks something of us, we forget that we have permission to say, you know what, let me get back to you on that. Like,
yeah, you don't have to know everything.
You don't have to know everything, and you don't have to do everything. You don't have to do it in the moment, which I think a lot of time, right? So like we forget to be able to say, hey, you know what, I'll get back to you. Like, you know what I mean?
I gotta think about that.
Yeah, like, great question. I don't know. You know, like, I don't know. I don't know is a boundary, right? And if someone keeps kind of pushing something on you, like, it's up to you to hold that line and be like, you know, I already said this isn't really working for me. Right. You know, I also have found with boundaries, a lot of people try to draw boundaries. And again, it's like wherever you are in your journey, meet yourself where you're at. Sometimes people feel more comfortable to draw a boundary in a way where, like, it's not very direct, kind of like dancing around, finagling around. And so just paying attention to how can you make it as direct as possible, so that the other person, so the other person actually knows what the hell the boundary is.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty, because that goes back to the whole, like, you're playing your rules of engagement or secrets. Or they're like, it's like you need to decode it. It's a surprise when you figure it out. I hope you get it right.
And you're like, yeah, exactly. The other thing too is we're evolving beings, and you shared this earlier, so it was beautiful, right? Is like our relationship has evolved over the course of the time that we have spent together. And the thing that's really beautiful about that is that our rules of engagement have changed.
Right.
And sometimes what happens is when we are in a current construct that we grow out of, or that we evolve into a different direction, we get a lot of resistance when we try to build something new. Now, understanding the new thing we're building, oftentimes, like, we can feel it. We can feel that we're building this new thing. We can feel this current thing that we had. I see this I experience this in, like, business. You know, maybe I have something that really worked. I'm always trying new things. And so, like, maybe I have something that worked for a while, but it's not working anymore. And now I'm trying to up level. I'm trying to offer the tribes a new way of communicating or being or what have you, right? And what ends up happening is you put yourself into a situation where maybe other people aren't going to understand it.
I got a cat problem over here. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I apologize.
That's okay.
He's like beating up my arm and attacking me while I'm over. I got a cat boundary problem currently going on here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. I can tell you lost me for a second too, and you're like trying to find the screen.
The screen left because he clicked a button.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He's telling you to go fuck yourself. No, so just knowing that, like, giving ourselves permission that, because that even if there's a boundary that you set, that if that boundary no longer works for you and you feel like there's another one that's going to work even better, to give ourselves permission to not have to stay in the confines of whatever we created that no longer serves us. I mean, that's something I would really like to empower people, is like, always give yourself permission to explore what's serving you and what's not, and upgrade.
And I think that's huge in so many arenas, but right now what's coming to me is food. Because there are a lot of, I think that people don't realize, and I have just started to realize this over like the last week, and really paying attention to hearing people about like food and stuff like that. Like, what are your boundaries surrounding food? And that's not always no, like you're saying, it can be yes too. But, you know, a perfect example is someone who was, you know, eating meat and then decided to cut meat out of their life, or cut dairy out, or make a dietary change. And all of a sudden everyone else's opinions, and we kind of talked about this in the society episode, are pushing on you. And that can make you feel uncomfortable to hold strong in that boundary. And now I'm kind of realizing, like, that's a lot of what it is. It's like people pushing on your boundary. And that happens a lot in family dynamics. You know, I've been paying attention to like what people are saying surrounding like their eating and stuff like that. You know, a lot of women have a lot of shame around their body, around what they eat. And there is a lot of also learned helplessness around that. Like, I can't help it. Well, my family makes this, or my family makes that. And I think we were talking about, like, you know, you go to a family party and, everything there maybe doesn't meet your dietary needs. And so if you show up to the party and you got a couple choices in regards, I think, to boundaries. You can show up to the party where, you know, like if you've got, you know, an Italian family like mine, there's going to be food there that's going to have gluten, and it's going to have meat, and it's going to be delicious. But if it's not your thing and it makes you not feel well and it works against your system, then you've got some choices. You can choose to eat it because you feel bad or weird about what other people might think if you're not, or you like the taste of it, so you're going to violate your own body's boundary. Your body has a literal boundary where it's like, please don't eat this because it's making me ill. You're going to eat it, and you're going to pay the consequences, so you don't pay the piper. You can go and eat nothing or bring nothing, and then be sad that your family didn't make any accommodations for you. Victima likes to do that and be like, no one loves me. No one made me a salad, you know?
For the fourth time. Yeah, you're like.
Yeah, for the fifth year in a row. Although I was kind of annoyed because when I was a kid, everyone was like, whatever, just, you know, pick the meat out of it, you know? I was still eating bread at the time and gluten. But then someone else like invited a girlfriend and she was a vegetarian. Everyone was like, oh, we made a salad. Lara's here. I'm like, I've been here for like 8 years. I have never seen a salad on this table. So that was kind of funny. But, you know, you can bring your own food. Bring your own food to places and stuff like that. Or people are, you know, oh, I can't help it. Oh, but my family uses a lot of meat. Oh, but my family does this. Like, listen, they love you and they want to see you well. And maybe it means a courageous conversation, like you're saying. If you're making a dietary or a fitness change and you know, people will be like, you can have just one, or you can do whatever. And it may be a conversation where you're like, hey, I know you love me and you want me to be healthy, but like, this wasn't making me feel great, so I'm not going to eat it. And so please support me in this. And if you can't, then I'm, you know, I know you've experienced a lot of this, like, then I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go to this restaurant, or I'm not going to do this. Or people need to, I think, pay attention and be cognizant of their language surrounding their food boundaries, because people give their power away. Oh, you can have just one of these. You're right. I can just have one of those, but I'm choosing not to. Thank you so much for the offer. And that's drawing a boundary and doing it in a loving way and appreciating them offering and trying to give you permission to violate your own boundary. But like, there's ways to do it, you know, but there's a lot of boundaries around food, which, and, you know, and like we said, fitness, but food is like strongly coming to mind.
Oh yeah. Like even ordering food. So, so I've got a ton of, I'm like a walking, you know, bubble of allergy. And it's funny to me because when I order, whether I'm with people or whether it's a server, a lot of people have made comments to me, you know, when I'm like, hey, so hey, is there any way that I could have the chef come out? And the chef comes out. Other people are getting really uncomfortable, you know, that I have this boundary where I want to feel great, you know? And so there's that, you know, you have to really fight through, like, it's not about anyone else. You are responsible for you, not responsible for them. And then, you know, people make comments while I'm ordering because they're uncomfortable. Again, not my responsibility. Don't take it personal. That's their own shit. Maybe they're not great at boundaries, maybe whatever, let them have their comment. And it's almost like a minefield you have to navigate when you're going through to order food, you know? And so I started explaining, you know, hey, here are my allergies. Here's what I can eat. Here's what I can't eat. Is there anything that you could do? Like, you're a chef. Listen, chefs went into the profession as creative artists.
Yeah, totally.
They did not go in to be cooks and make the same shit over and over. So I always leverage that, right? Or even if it's a server, I always remind myself, they're not going to get sick if they get my order wrong. I am.
Right.
So like, guess what? And so that's the thing I've learned is like the whole, like, oh, that's fine. Like when it comes to the table and it has cheese. Oh, that's fine. No, it's not, because I'll get sick. Now, granted, have I sometimes made choices like eating pizza that I know is going to make me sick? Yes, but it's my choice. Again.
Yeah, you own it.
I'm responsible for me. So it's like when I have decided and asked for something, this is where your actions need to align with your desires. And we're just giving you an example, but this applies to anything.
Yeah.
When I order my food and I say I'm allergic to this, this, and this, and any one of those things come on my plate, if it doesn't go back, then I am not honoring me. Right? Another thing is, this quote's coming to mind, and this has to do with people pleasing. There was a movie I was watching. I think it was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and the serial killer says to the person, I won't spoiler alert, or maybe this is kind of, so maybe you fast forward.
I already read it, so it's good.
Well, you can't fast forward me anyways.
That's true.
But that's it. But so just there's a serial killer who talks about the psychology of a victim, and he says every single one of his victims came willingly. And right? And he said, and also he addresses that every single one of them's intuition was fucking screaming at them not to go with him. But they did it because they would rather die than say no to a fucking stranger.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's also, so it's just like, so we get to practice boundaries. And it's always so funny because it's like, you are the one that is with you 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to figure out, that's what the whole book is about, right? The Epic XU book is having a relationship, an amazing relationship with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you need to be like flying off trapeze bars and going to Egypt and do whatever. If you want to do that, great.
Right.
If you don't, and you want to like chill in the Midwest and wear hats and raise a family and cuddle up on the couch and watch Netflix with your significant other, and you love your life and you love it every day, and like this is what you've always dreamed of, then you're fucking winning, sister or brother.
Exactly. That's, again, there is no cookie blah, 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 blah. There is no cookie cutter. There is no one size fits all. It's just the equation to boundaries. And in the series, I'll give you loads of examples and we'll go deeper and we'll talk about high vibe, but just the initial equation and foundation for boundaries is you have to listen to yourself and you have to honor it with your words and you have to honor it with your desire, with your action. And you also have to give yourself some grace and give yourself some grace, is that you're going to go through some bumps.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is really cool, and when I say bumps, I mean learning curves. Like, you're going to try something and go like, well, that was really rigid. Or like, that was,
or like, oops, I broke that boundary. Like, oh, I said I was going to leave work at, 5:00 and it's 5:30. Yeah. But it's like, okay, good to know. Pay attention to those things. That's it.
Yeah. And the thing is you can't have a great relationship with yourself if you can't honor your own boundaries. And that's why boundaries are so magical and so important. And also in relationships, it helps in relationships of any kind and all kinds. It helps create safety. So like if I remember I had an ex tell me about 9 months into a relationship. He basically said to me that he was afraid that if he ended up with me, he would be a shell of a man. This was after my spicy McChicken days. So I was sober at this point. So if someone else had said this to me when I was a raging hot mess and a drunk, I would have understood. But I was I was kind of perplexed when he said that. And I said to him, what makes you say that? And he dropped 9 months of complaints on me. Things he had never brought up that I did that bothered him.
Oh,
never told me. And I said,
rules of engagement.
Yeah. And I said, whoa. No matter who you end up with, you will be a shell of a man because you don't actually share your true feelings.
Yeah.
That's not my responsibility. That's yours.
Right.
And also what was interesting was one of the things in our relationship that he just couldn't handle was that I do speak my mind and I am, if someone is violating a boundary, whether it's your friend, a coworker, I'm not going to just let them violate my boundary so that you can feel comfortable. No.
Yeah.
Right. And so with this particular individual, he had a coworker who was just a complete bitch to me and like would isolate me and be, and I wasn't okay with it. And I'm also, another boundary that I have, or one of my own Sparkle Palace things, is I'd like to be with someone who plays in my Sparkle boundaries with me. And that like, if that's your friend, that you help me create some healthy boundaries, right? It's a shit ton easier. It's kind of like, a man with his mother. It's a shit ton easier for everyone involved, or not easier, but more powerful when the man draws a boundary with the mom versus the woman having to draw the boundary for the blah, 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 right? Same thing with, maybe a woman and her father, right? Like, why should your man have to draw a boundary with your, like these, right? Same thing. If someone is violating my partner's boundaries, I have no problem being like, oh my, you're being a dick, you need to stop, to my friends, right? Again, the type of friendships I create is we tend to be pretty direct with each other. And so, if you were being and then I would just tell you you're being a dick and you would be like, yeah, you're right. And then you would walk away. And, but like walk away happy and it would be fine. And so it also creates, boundaries create safety for yourself to know that like you trust you. It's a lot about confidence and you get to be proud of being you when you draw boundaries. And it's also about creating safety within relationships because it's like, hey, we're open to actually talk about and co-create things that will allow us to really thrive together.
Yeah. I think that, too, when in learning how to create and foster healthy boundaries, it allows you to not necessarily like, you're not creating boundaries for other people. I have an example of this, but it allows you to look at things from a frame of mind where you're like, am I violating this other person's boundary, or am I disrespecting them in some way by these actions that I'm taking, and like in a compassionate way, and like, hey, what can I do to make that better without even necessarily the other person saying something to you, and just being respectful. So like, like you're big on like not being late, and a lot of people struggle maybe with like being late. And I was definitely one of those people at one time. And I feel like when you start working on your own boundaries, because if you're going to be holding other people accountable to their own boundaries, it becomes a lot easier for you to be accountable to your own boundaries and to look and see, are there other things you can do to be respectful to other people? So like time is an example. when things get in the way and like people can be understanding of that. Again, it's not being rigid. But yeah, like consistently getting better at getting places on time, and being time's a valuable commodity. Like a good example is, things get busy, you get all flustered, your week goes on, and like, so my babysitter, right? She works certain days a week, and sometimes the ATM is out on the way home from work, or like, we're just trying to get home, and she always wants to get paid at least by the end of the week. Well, she may babysit, Tuesday and Wednesday, or Monday and Tuesday. And there are times I've come home and I've been like, oh my God, I totally forgot to get your money. I'm so sorry. Can I get it to you tomorrow? And she's like, yeah, no problem. Or as long as I have it by the end of the week or whatever. And then all of a sudden Wednesday goes by and like, I was too busy and I didn't get her the money. And now she's being sweet, but then I text her and maybe on Thursday, I'm like, hey, I'm coming over. I'm dropping it over, because she lives in the neighborhood. And that might happen more than I care for it to happen. And so like the last couple of, months, I've been trying to it's made me somehow more cognizant, where I'm like, you know what? That's nice. She's being really lenient with it, but it's not really cool on my part. So I need to make a bigger effort to get her money when she's walking out the door, and the last day that she's babysitting my child that week, whether it's Tuesday or Friday, and just having that, because it's respectful to her. And so like, it's funny because a lot of things have started to come to mind with other people where I'm like, hey, am I doing it the best way I can do it? And not in like a shame place, but from a just like, I want to be better, so how can I make that better? And like kind of doing it in that way. So I think that's a cool side effect, or like progression and evolution of creating your own healthy boundaries, as you start to kind of like look out for other people.
Yeah, what you're talking about too is upfront agreements and expectations. Again, those can evolve and shift and grow and change. But if you have, so to me, I have gotten into a point in my life where like time is to me like the most powerful commodity of like squeezing joy and sparkle and so like if someone's going to be 6 or 7 minutes late. Now, to your point, so we've been friends for so long, you've put a lot of deposits into the bank. If you're late, it's me, but it's different than like, I have a lot of people who reach out asking for my time. And if I schedule something with them, I'll have someone be 5 minutes late for a 10-minute meeting.
Right.
No.
Yeah. Right.
And these are first meetings, right? So if someone's like, now granted, again, I'm not looking for perfection here, but I am my own. So to me, I believe personally that time is an upfront agreement, because you're agreeing upfront, and so that's more of maybe a blatant one. Whereas, I think oftentimes we forget to have upfront agreements, or even talking to people openly, like, hey, I noticed this, what's that all about? So boundaries can also be questions like, hey, what do you need from me? Or, hey, what's going on? Or I noticed something's different, or how can I make this right? Like you can create it in that way. It doesn't always have to be you communicating it. You could also be asking to be on the receiving end of whatever it is. The other thing is honoring people's boundaries. The more that you are aware of what boundaries are and people are violating yours, what you're describing, and I went through this as well, is when I start noticing someone barreling through my boundaries, I'm paying attention to how can I honor others. And so I'll give you an example of something small that's barreling a boundary that to me was like, at the time in my life was a pretty big violation. But I'll show you how I did it that did not take ownership for my own violation. For the violation. So like there was a girlfriend who asked me to, I later realized like she just didn't know how to handle boundaries at all. So she just barely threw them. I take ownership that I allowed her to. I constantly was expressing my boundaries, but I never really showed them. So let me give you an example. I was heading to her place and I was packing my suitcase. I'm notorious, as you know, I'm notorious for overpacking. I've actually like, now it's crazy how light I can pack, but I used to be like, Erin and I would go on trips together and, I would actually have to put some of my stuff in her suitcase. So I was we had no boundaries. Yay.
I was like, sure, I'm 5 pounds underweight.
Yeah. So I would throw my stuff in hers. So I was going to visit a girlfriend. And she asked me to pick up some items she was in another country, and she asked me to pick up some items for her, and to bring them to her. And I said, sorry, I don't have any space in my suitcase, which I legit at that time in my life wanted everything. And also, if you go over, you have to pay.
Right.
And she said, haha, no, but seriously, can you, and I was like, oh no, I'm like legitimately serious. I don't have space in my suitcase, and she was like, and she started negotiating my boundary.
Yeah.
Now I take ownership that I allowed this to happen instead of just saying, no, it's like your son. No. Right. And she ended, and so I said to her, I said, hey, listen, I already have my suitcase full. If you'd like to pay the $45 or whatever the 20, whatever it is extra, I'm happy to do that so that you could have. So it was my attempt to stick to my boundary. She kept barreling through and coming up with, you'll notice sometimes like people who are in the sales industry will do that as well. Like in their head, it's how can I get you to agree with what I want? I was in the sales industry as an intuitive for 8 years. So it was like constantly being around, I felt of it more as consulting. I didn't particularly see it as, anyways, that's another thing. So we all handle it a little bit different, but so she kept selling me on why I should do this for her. And finally I was like, okay. And then talk about passive aggressive, that I was upset about it. I was upset that she barreled through boundaries instead of just being like, no. And so the thing is that we can really look at ways that like, that really helps me understand, like, it's something little, but if someone says no to you, and I've been guilty of that, where someone has said no to me on something and then I kind of push it. And then later I'm like, you know what? I'm really sorry. Like, you said no and I pushed it. Old pattern, my apologies. Right. So like we can do things later. And in honoring other people's boundaries, sometimes what you might find is that when someone asks for something and you give it to them, they're upset that you gave them what they asked for. So like I've had people draw boundaries with me where they ask me to back off. So like, let's say I'm doing coaching and it's like, we're in a situation where we're trying to navigate something, like, not in the moment of the coaching, but like they're asking me for, I can energetically, and maybe they're drawing a boundary. They're drawing a space, where like, let me have time to process this. Okay. Yeah. So then I allow the boundary of processing, trusting that when they're ready, they'll come to me. And then in instances, I've had people come back to me and say, well, you didn't include me in this and this, and I'm really upset. And it's just like, well, hold on a second. You don't get to pick how, like, this is unwritten rules. Obviously there was a rule, like I could send things to group stuff or emails, but I can't send text messages to right? It's just knowing, like, hold on a second. You're responsible for the specificity of the boundary, right? And so also knowing if you're honoring, so you as the person for your own boundary, you're responsible for the specificity. And if someone else gives you a vague boundary, you can ask for clarification, or you could just honor it, whatever it is that they're asking for.
Yeah, at face value.
Yeah, and not feel responsible then when the person's triggered that you honored their boundary.
Yeah, like people, when they break up with somebody and they say, don't call me anymore, and then that person doesn't call them and they're like,
you don't love
me. And I'm like, but you told them not to. But they listened to you. I don't understand. And you're sad about it now. But it happens. Yeah. Like you said, it's all, some of those things too are just like, it's maturity. And as you grow up, you're like, oh, okay. Like you just kind of grow out of it. Not all the time, because there are plenty of emotional children in the world, and we're helping people become emotional adults.
Yeah. And also we're reparenting ourselves, I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, until you know that you don't know it, and so that's where the grace comes in, is just giving yourself permission to ebb and flow and figure it out and take risks and have that's where courage comes in, and just really giving yourself permission to explore and play and experiment and trial it out, and and all the different pieces of that. So feels like a good stopping point, unless there's anything else you'd like to. So we'll give you that little nugget just to start playing with being true to yourself, saying what you actually mean. and following through on what you say, asking for what you actually want, and making sure that, you know, even when it comes to your health and your body, that you're the one that's responsible for what you look like, what you feel like, and how much energy you have, and really taking that ownership of that. And also, if there are relationships in your life and someone's like a total, you know, boundary violator and you're being a victima, that person, oh, I can't believe this person, you know, is doing that. It's like you're an active participant in the co-creation of that crazy storm, you know, of that no boundary storm. And so just knowing, and also giving yourself permission to constantly reevaluate what needs to be in place for you to create sparkle and safety, and right. And it's never too late to go back and, you know, reassess or readdress. And it's also, you know, as I have evolved on the journey, I'm eating humble pie all the time. So like there's so much humility in the journey, and going back, and like, to me, it's never about the outcome. It's about, if I go back and apologize to someone, like, hey, 3 years ago, I totally violated this boundary that I didn't even know was a thing, and I'm really sorry about that. And people, you know, respond, and sometimes they don't, which is totally okay. But to me, it's about me being proud of being me. So I would encourage everyone, that's what the Epic Sexy You movement is all about. It's about loving being you, and defining success as the amount of time in your life that you get to spend genuinely loving being you. And boundaries are one of the ways that totally happens. So
yeah. If anyone wants to borrow my toddler for like an hour at a time to really assess your own boundaries and see how boundaries are really done. Like, if that kid doesn't want to put shoes on, they ain't going on. If he doesn't want to wear pants, there's no pants on. So like, it's funny to watch kids because they're real good at boundaries. And as parents, we're like, we're going to barrel through those because we can't have you go out naked all the time and piss on everything. So let me know.
Can you, so I'm busy that day, but can you show us one more time the Perfectionista Victima spotlight, and then we'll go out with that. We'll end it on a bang.
Oh, sure. Let's see,
the lamp.
It's like, it's my time to shine. Everybody takes advantage of me. I'm so sad about it.
All right, guys, catch you later.
Bye.